Welcome back to The Open. We are 30 minutes into your European trading day, and here are your top stories. Calling on China. The US says Russia asked Beijing for military aid in Ukraine. White House advisor Jake Sullivan meets Xi Jinping's top diplomat today. That is in Rome. Negotiators from Russia and Ukraine are set to hold further talks today after a weekend where Moscow increased its aerial attacks on areas closer to Ukraine's border with Poland. Plus, panic selling grips Chinese tech stocks as concerns pile up. New COVID lockdowns are announced in the tech hub of Shenzhen, but also in Jilin province. OK, let's check in then on these markets. Modest gains that you're seeing across the benchmark, the European stocks at 600. And we'll break it down index by index. The FTSE 100 is now range bound. Basic Resources is a drag there for that index, which remains lower by about 3% year to date and has outperformed European stocks and US stocks. But today, it's Basic Resources as a drag on the FTSE 100. The DAX is gaining 1.7%. Autos near the top of the list the last time I looked in terms of sectors, and certainly the results and the bullishness, in fact, from the outlook from VW is part of the mix for DAX. Again, the broader European stock 600, you're seeing gains of 0.5%. The mood music around diplomacy on Ukraine and Russia started to look a little bit more positive over the weekend. We talked about those talks that are going to be happening later today, and then, of course, the meeting between the Chinese and the Americans, and see if anything comes of that as well. Oil is off today, and that is playing into what's happening across the commodity space, of course. Autos and parts gaining 3.5%, followed by insurance, banks and construction materials. Those are the top four sectors as we speak in terms of the picture. Basic Resources down 1.5%, followed by healthcare. Energy also lower by 5 cents. 108 was the last time I looked on Brent. Let's get back then to the picture around the geopolitics and the war in Ukraine and what it means around cybersecurity and technology. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has sparked a turning point for Putin's long-prepared break from the Western internet. Social platforms like Facebook and Twitter, they've been blocked by the Russian government, while Apple, Dell and Microsoft are curtailing their operations in the country. There's concern that the current conflict will inspire Russia to turn more closely to a Chinese model to insulate it from the West. Aleksandr Litreev, CEO of Solar Labs, joins us now. It's a company that makes software to circumvent online censorship, and Aleksandr fled Russia after working with the opposition leader Navalny and has deep insight into the cyberspace picture, but also the picture around human rights and censorship in Russia. Aleksandr, thank you for joining us. What is the situation on the ground now in Russia? How has the censorship changed of the media space, of the access to information, just in the last 3 weeks of this war?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. So basically, we have tremendous changes in the Russian censorship. We see that Russian government now blocking resources which they didn't block before. For example, today's morning, Instagram became unavailable for all the Russian citizens, and none of them are able to access it somehow except VPN services. We also see that massive restrictions are imposed to the social networks other than Instagram. So, for example, Twitter or Facebook. Those social networks not only blocked in Russia, but also recognized as a terrorist and extremist communities. And basically, if you are a signed user there and you have an account on Facebook or Instagram, under the Russian law, Russian prosecution may recognize you as a terrorist or extremist, which make it danger for the people to use those social networks in Russia, even through the VPN service.
Well, OK, so what are those tools? I mean, you mentioned the VPN service. Have you seen an uptick in demand for VPNs, or are the risks just too great, given what you've just outlined there?
Yeah, we see the great use for VPN services there. We see that people are massively looking for tools to bypass those restrictions, despite the fact that the regular VPN services are under attack. And for example, such VPN services as NordVPN or ExpressVPN are not accessible in Russia. We see that, for example, our VPN services, which is based on blockchain, the VPN technology Sentinel, is fully accessible in Russia, and it's much more complicated to get it banned. So government does not possess enough resources to achieve that. And we see that demand for this decentralized VPN services is growing, and we see that, in generally speaking, blockchain technologies are now trending in Russia. And since people are getting banned from Visa and MasterCard. They still have to transfer money throughout the border to other countries, to their relatives and so on. They're using blockchain technologies for that, Bitcoin and so on. And we see same use for blockchain to provide a more free access to the internet.
Alexander, we talked about the fact that Russia may be moving more towards a kind of Chinese style or a Chinese form of the internet and the way that they kind of put in place restrictions. But it took China years, decades arguably, to build out the great firewall that they have there. Is the technology now available potent enough to kind of break through these restrictions? Just building on your last answer, is it possible for Russia in a short space of time to build those kind of restrictions in place, or can you get around them easily?
Well, it will be possible, but it will be much worse than in China, because they will have some additional consequences which they haven't predicted and they haven't prepared for it. So, for example, if they banning, let's say, one web service at the moment, trying to make it inaccessible for all of the Russians, they might ban accidentally like 10 another web services which shouldn't be banned, and that's the only thing.
Listen, I want to draw on your experience working with the opposition in Russia. I know you're based in Estonia now. You've had to flee, essentially, the country. You've worked with Navalny, of course, the figurehead of the opposition movement, largely in Russia. What is your sense, Alexander, of the scale, the scope of opposition in Russia to this war?
Well, generally speaking, I personally don't know any people who are in favor in the war with Ukraine, and I do not personally know any people who are like cherishing it or telling that this is something which Russia should do. And everyone is condemning war with Ukraine. And talking of the opposition, we gathering lots of people on rallies in Moscow, St. Petersburg, and many other cities in Russia. People are taking it to the streets and telling the government basically that they are not like what's happening. They are against the war and they don't want it. But well, we can consider those people also as victims of the Putin's regime, because they get oppressed because of their speeches. We see that people going out to the streets with signs "No War," and they got imprisoned because of that. And this is ridiculous.
What is are you still in contact? Are you able to have any communication with Navalny? And do you still see him as that figurehead? Is he still able, in his incarceration, to rally the opposition?
Well, yeah, that's really interesting that despite the fact that he's in prison, he's still able to manage the protest and to lead it. And he asked everyone to go out to the streets through his trusted persons who visit him in the prison, and this message was heard, and there was quite a lot of people going out to the rallies last days. And as they announced, the Navalny team announced, the rallies will take place every single day from now, and that's gonna continue till the war ends.
I was in Barcelona at the Mobile World Congress a couple of weeks ago, and I was talking to tech executives there. They were saying they haven't seen major cyber attacks by the Russian state on Ukraine or indeed NATO allies during this conflict. And there was a level of surprise that hasn't happened. There was an expectation, given its history, that Russia would launch significant cyber attacks. Do you have an explanation for why that hasn't happened? Are they holding it still as potentially part of their arsenal in this war?
Yeah, actually, I have. There was several groups of hackers who used to work for a government, and they were cooperating with Russian cybersecurity agencies and so on, and they were conducting some cyber attacks on Western world. And for now, they changed their minds because they saw the war, they saw killed people, they saw that Putin is bombing like peaceful citizens of Ukraine, and they just tried to pull away from it and don't want to interact with the Putin's regime any longer. So as a result, we see that many of hackers who used to be in hands of Putin as an instruments, they're not doing that any longer. And I just personally think that those people who were involved in those cyber attacks will no longer work with Putin's regime and for its favor.
Interesting insights. We appreciate your time, Aleksandr Litreev, joining us out of Estonia, CEO of Solar Labs, who's worked with Navalny, of course, the opposition leader there in Russia, and has helped to build out some software as well around protecting citizens for some of these censorship tools that the Russian state is putting in place. We appreciate those insights. Thank you. Coming up, oil is falling again this morning as Iran carries out a missile strike in northern Iraq. That's days after international negotiations on the nuclear deal stalled. We've got more on the geopolitics of oil. That is next, and this